Okay.
Okay, we'll call this council meeting to order at 6 p.m. Good evening. Portage shares a lot of hockey history with the community of Humboldt, Saskatchewan, and the Humboldt Broncos. This history was marked by intense competition and mutual respect. The Portage Terriers played Humboldt Broncos back-to-back in 2008, 2009 for the Anavet Cup, and again in 2012. We were shocked and saddened to hear about Friday night's tragedy in Saskatchewan. And out of deep respect for the community of Humboldt, I'd ask everybody here to please rise, and we'll have one moment of silence. Okay, thank you. Please be seated. Our next item is the announcement of prize winners for the Connect Portage sign-ups. I think everybody will remember back in February, the City of Portage announced 2 new communication systems, the City of Portage la Prairie mobile app and Connect Portage. Citizens who downloaded the app and registered for Connect Portage before noon today were entered into a contest for a chance to win a Samsung tablet or a Google Home Mini. This afternoon, via a random computer-generated draw, the names of these winners were selected, and I have the envelopes right here. And the winner of the Samsung Galaxy Tab E Lite is Tanya Jarvis. And the winner of the Google Home Mini is Eileen Davey. Give you those 2 names? Okay. Entertain a motion for adoption of the minutes, please.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held at City Hall on Monday, March 26, 2018 be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Espy and seconded by Councillor Draycott. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have no delegations this evening. We'll move into hearings. Open the hearing for variation PC 11-18. This is for Dreger at 156 Wilkinson Crescent. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close public hearing PC 11-818 for Dreger. So
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Fraze. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Okay, so for council's consideration tonight, we are looking to vary the side yard requirement of 1.5 meters to be reduced to 0.6 meters. In the application here, you can see that there is a small addition being planned. The application has been circulated to various city departments with the concern from city operations that the drainage swale between this property and the property beside it must still be maintained. And so that's a normal depression in the landscaping to make sure we have water that moves away. And management did have some concerns over the 0.6 distance to the property line. And also, we did have public notices sent out to all property owners within a 100-meter radius, and to my knowledge, no concerns were brought forward, and obviously nothing here at the public hearing tonight. So it is a recommendation of council, and I so move that the council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Elizabeth and Bernie Dreger to vary the side yard requirement of 1.5 meters to be reduced to 0.6 meters to allow for a 2.54 meter by 6.71 meter addition to the existing garage at the property known as 156 Wilkinson Crescent, which is legally described as Lot 10, Block 6, Plan 1721, Parish of Portage la Prairie. I should mention before I finish off that the homeowners are aware of the concerns and are addressing them in the expansion. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Fraze. Questions or comments on the motion? I have a question, Councillor Buds. You mentioned the report management had a concern about the distance. Was it different than the drainage, or was that the concern?
Management want to speak to that?
I'll defer that question to our operations, Kelly Braden.
It's two unrelated issues, I guess.
So besides the drainage, what was the other concern?
The other concern was the shorter proximity of only 0.6 meters between properties. I believe that was the other concern, right? For management?
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Okay, we'll open the conditional use hearing for PC 13-18. This is City of Portage la Prairie. Anyone here to speak to the hearing? Entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I'd like to move that we close PC 13-18.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Fraze. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
So the applicant for this is obviously the City of Portage la Prairie. You can see the sketch associated to or attached to this conditional use application. It is to approve an LED leaderboard, reader's leader. Maybe there'll be a leader on the board, but it is a reader board sign to be installed in the front yard. And you can see the sign will face primarily to the west, but will be closer than the required 91.5 meters from a residential zone. However, the sign is only single-faced, and because of its orientation, should not affect the residential area. Again, this was circulated between city departments with no concerns, and again, we did the 100-meter radius with no concerns brought forward, and no concerns brought forward to this public hearing. So it is the recommendation of the committee, and I so move that the council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the conditional use application of the City of Portage la Prairie to allow for an LED reader board to be installed in the front yard at the property 124 3rd Street Northeast, which is legally described as Lot 39, 46, Plan 10, Parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Draycott. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We'll move into committees. Finance Legislative Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you. So this particular first item, the local vehicles for hire bylaw, is nothing new to council. And so we have got a couple of supporting documents in this report. Basically tonight we're looking for first reading. This came up in committee. I won't go through it as a whole. We do know that this was a bylaw that was extensively reviewed to allow for provisions for, I'll call it the Uber-style type vehicles for hire in our community, as well as really dealing with some of the annual fees and the licensing surrounding livery services here in our city. So it is the recommendation of the committee, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the local vehicles for hire bylaw by giving bylaw number 18-8666 first reading.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Fraze. Any questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Draycott?
I did entertain a couple of questions from the community on this particular motion over the last 2 weeks. The question did come up in terms of, and so I'm just looking for some clarity for the community, in terms of a vehicle that is for hire and their signage, whether the signage has to be a permanent signage or whether it can be removable like some of the vehicles for hire right now, whether that's a requirement in our bylaw for them. So just some clarification on that.
I will have Mr. Pito answer that question, but I do believe the signage is not required to be permanent. There is deckling and magnetic signs, I believe, that are acceptable, but I will allow Mr. Pito to answer that.
You are correct that the signage can be magnetic, but I want to just double check that with our Director of Corporate Services, Ms. McFarland, because she has done the majority of work on this bylaw. Could you speak to the signage?
I'll just echo that the magnetic signage is fine. What isn't fine, though, is something that looks very temporary. I guess an example would be taping a piece of cardboard on the side of the vehicle.
And the second concern, if I could, that I did hear from throughout the community in the past 2 weeks was just that if the city is going to go through the process of revamping this bylaw, if there is an easily recognizable place on our website where people can easily go to see which vehicles have actually gone through this process that are legitimate businesses within the city that have been approved by the city. So something on our website where people can go and see the vehicles for hire that are legitimate, that have been licensed properly within the city.
So that's very good feedback and not included in the bylaw, and something we can ask management for a takeaway. Conversely, on the other side of things, as I had mentioned in committee, the concerns over the enforcement of the bylaw, and so the companies that are not actually properly licensed and to do business in Portage the way they should be, we need to be able to crack down on that. And so that'll be through, as we heard, the bylaw enforcement, but almost more specifically the RCMP as well. And we know that their resources are what they are, but we'll have to remain this being a big focus for our city. So yeah, that's good points on the kind of a registry, if you will, and then obviously in the enforcement.
Okay, that answered your questions, Councillor?
Thank you very much.
And I know there was a hand up in the gallery. During council, only council gets to ask questions. However, we do have a question period that's open to the public at the end of committee. So if the gentleman had his hand up, if you can wait till later, you'll get to ask your question then.
So the motion stands.
All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Okay, the second item in my report was the Infrastructure General Reserve Fund, and we did hear about this in committee as well, as we spoke to the importance of continuing to invest in our infrastructure. This last budget cycle gave us kind of a highlight of all of the assets that we have under basically our administration, if you will. And so there is definitely an area of gaps between what's available for funding and the need. And so this is a proactive step by council to develop this reserve, and so something that we support. So it is a recommendation of the committee, and I so move that the Council of City of Portage la Prairie approve the Infrastructure General Reserve bylaw by giving bylaw 18-8667 first reading.
Moved by Councillor Budds and seconded by Councillor Wall. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. And that concludes Finance, Councillor Budds.
Yeah, sorry, but I'll move right into City Planning and Economic Development. Last meeting, Councillor Dreger brought forth the February 2018 building reports for our information. I trust that Council has reviewed that information, and I am available along with my colleague from the Planning District to answer any questions, if there are any, before we just accept this report for information. And seeing none, that does conclude this committee's report.
Councillor Budds. Community Services Committee. Councillor Fraser, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Community Service Committee has nothing on the agenda tonight.
Thank you. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall.
Waterworks Committee has nothing to report this evening, Your Worship.
Thank you. Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for Transportation Committee this evening.
Public Safety Committee, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Public Safety Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor Halpa, anything from the youth councillors this evening?
Thank you, Your Worship, but we have nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. We have one item of new business. That's the tender award for green space maintenance. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you. So this, again, is an item I don't think is new to council. This is something that council did review and actually went back through another RFP process to address some of the scope of work as well as budgetary concerns. So just as a highlight, the current contract for maintenance of green areas for the City of Portage la Prairie expired back in the fall. A tender was issued on March 20th for the 3-year period starting April 1 to October 31st. And so the tender was advertised as our normal way of advertising our tenders were, and basically followed our procurement policy. It deals with sustainability and best value bid as required by council. The pricing portion of the criteria was increased to 40 points from 30 points, and the reputation of the bidder was decreased from 20 to 10. Tenders were evaluated by a separate management committee of 4 city staff. Ratings were based on a total of 100 points. And so you can see that a minimum score of 45 out of a possible 60 was required to consider moving forward. So there were 5 tenders. 3 proponents did not achieve the minimum 45 and were therefore taken out of the consideration pool. The proponent with the highest rated average score used a combination of price and other factors was this numbered company at 686-5934. That's also known as Dr. Green Lawn Care, and they scored 88.6 points. Dr. Green Lawn Care has had the contract for the previous 4-year term, and administration is fully confident in their ability to complete the contract. Go Green Landscape and Go Green Lawn and Landscape was the other bidder, and their in a very tight process was 88 points. And so the total bid price for the highest rated proponent was $481,607.21. Again, that's over a 3-year period, or $160,535.74 per year. The bid price for the 2018 portion of work would be slightly over budget, over the amount of, $3,407.77 over the budget amount net of GST. So our policy, as was developed by the city, was followed here, and we can see that we have a decision to make on the tendering of these services. So administration did come forth with a recommendation, and I'll read it, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie award the contract for the maintenance of green areas to 686-5934 Manitoba Limited, also known as Dr. Green Lawn Care, for the 3-year period from April 1st, 2018 to October 31st, 2020, for the price of $505,687.57, including GST.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Praise. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We have no old business, so council will be adjourned at 6:18 p.m. and we're going to move right into committee. We'll call committee to order at 6:18 p.m. First up is Finance, Legislative, Property Committees. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you. So as you heard in my report in Finance, that there was first readings for 2 items, and now in the next council meeting we'll deal with the second and third readings, so I won't go over those. A new item for council's consideration discussion is a lease agreement with Cocoa Platts Rec Club, or Community Club, sorry. And so we have had a long-standing agreement with this group. It was a 10-year lease agreement, which was signed in 2004 and expired actually back in 2013. The terms of that agreement, though, have been basically maintained since its expiry, and now basically we want to clean this item up and to take a look at what we need to do in terms of touch-ups on the agreement. So I know Mr. Pito has been in negotiations with representatives from Cocoa Platts, and the main changes to the agreement are as outlined as follows. We've now included that premises in our blanket insurance, so we will now have that insured under our policy, but they are responsible for the deductible in the event of a claim. And the city's park staff will provide 40 hours of labor when requested and as time allows, and the lease can be terminated upon mutual agreement between the parties. So those are the three main items that come up that were kind of outside of the original terms of the contract. Is there any questions on the term? The actual lease itself is also an attachment there.
Councillor Draycott.
How long will this lease take effect? Will it again be a 10-year term?
It is a 10-year lease as well, yes. And the 40 hours of work is not for the whole 10 years, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I know that would be kind of spread out a little ways, so it's 40 hours per year. Any other questions if we move on? I think it's a good sign of council to move forward with this group. The other one is another agreement, and that's for safety officer. And for those of you who remember, that was a position that was shared between the RM, the city, and the PRA at one point in time. And so now it's time to revisit that agreement. As I mentioned, the RM of Portage, Portage Regional Recreational Authority in the city, basically split this role. The city paid 60% of the safety officer's salary, and the PRA and the RM would each pay 20%. That was the original agreement. We've now been notified that the RM is not interested in continuing to fund this position, so now it's up to the city and the PRA to then finalize it. So the PRA payment would increase to 25% as of April 2018 and 30% for 6 days of service. Additionally, both parties would like the agreement to increase from just 1 year to 3 years to provide a little bit more stability. So it's essentially an agreement between the city and the PRA now. And in speaking as a board member of the PRA, I know that David and his crew over there value this agreement and definitely wanted to continue and obviously expand. So is there any questions in regards to this funding, this position? Okay. Hearing none, I'll be bringing both of those things forward. And my final item is a Delta Beach campground agreement. And so this is, again, hopefully not news for the council members, but there is a very significant effort put forth by the RM for the development of the Delta Beach campground. And this is a particularly, I would consider to be a housekeeping but necessary item, just for the establishment and the understanding that by way of our agreement in funding the PRA with the city and the RM, that we have a memorandum of understanding that the PRA will be involved in the management of that Delta Beach campground. And so I'll be making forth a recommendation that we understand that that's happening. It's something that we agreed to as part of our basically arm's length involvement with the PRA. Any questions on that particular agreement? Okay, that concludes my committee report.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. There's nothing from City Planning and Economic Development tonight.
Nothing here.
Thank you. Community Services Committee, Councillor Fraze.
Thank you, Worship. Nothing for Community Services this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Wall, Waterworks Committee.
Yes, Your Worship. We'll be bringing forth the report to Council on the biosolids land application contract. That's something that occurs every year. It's how we dispose of the residuals from the treatment of wastewater at the Water Pollution Control Facility. There were 2 bidders this year. I think that's the first time in my memory that we've had 2 bidders. And if I could open this, I could tell you more, but I won't open. Anyway. So the report shows us that we had 2 bidders, Cinnabon Injections and WeSuck Incorporated. Total points out of 100 for Cinnabon were 99.3 and for WeSuck were 80.6. So that'll be coming forward next week. Besides that, the Wastewater Division annual report. We treated on average 17 million liters of wastewater per day during the year last year. We had 97.3% compliance rate with our environment license. So I'd like to commend the operations and maintenance staff at the Water Pollution Control Facility for their good work there. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor Draycott, Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for the Transportation Committee this evening except for a little bit less snow
Okay, that's a promise or
Well-
prediction?
on the streets right now.
Okay. Public Safety Committee, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Worship. Just the one item. It's the City of Portage la Prairie Emergency Preparedness Bylaw update that will be coming forward for first reading on April 23rd. Some of the highlights. The Municipal Emergency Coordinator and Deputy Emergency Coordinator are established as designated officer positions. The Director of Public Safety is appointed as the Municipal Emergency Coordinator, and the duties of the emergency organization have been reviewed and updated.
Okay, and there are also some tabletop exercises scheduled for the next month and a half, I believe.
There are.
Okay, before we adjourn committee, we'll open question periods. So if members of the public have questions for council, information-seeking questions, I'd invite you to take the microphone at the podium.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors.
Sorry, did the gentleman with his hand up have a question? Is it okay if he goes first, Mr. Knott?
Yeah, I can.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Sorry?
Your name for the record?
I wanna have some question about vehicle for hire by law.
Sir, could you just let us know your name for the record?
Yeah, Wasik, W-A-S-I-Q, Wasik, and last name is Razak, R-A-Z-Z-A-Q. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I have a question regarding vehicle for hire by law 188666. So the question is because in the other hand, I have Bill 30 in my hands, and on the other hand, I have guidelines for the passenger for local vehicle for hire. Here, council mentions like the new local vehicle for hire, sports vehicle using flat fare or meters, as well as allows for shuttles, special shuttles transporting multiple passengers to multiple locations. So I have the question about transporting multiple passenger in shuttles, because I believe this is the violation of the Local Vehicle for Hire Act, Bill 30, because in Bill 30 definition, it's clearly mentioned like vehicle for hire means a vehicle with a manufactured seating capacity originally designed for 10 or fewer occupants, including the driver, that is used to transport a passenger for compensation where the vehicle is hired for a single trip only, and the passenger controls the route traveled or the destination. So I could not understand when shuttle is picking multiple people, how a passenger can go only for a single trip. The other thing, like how he control the travel route and the destination when he is sharing the ride, because in Bill 30 it's clearly mentioned the vehicle for hire can be used only for a single trip. And the definition, in your definition for vehicle for hire, it's mentioned seating capacity 10 or fewer, and that transportation passenger for compensation, and further you categorize including taxis, limousine, shuttles, and PTP. Here you mentioned point to point, but in Bill 30 it was mentioned personal transportation provider vehicle. So point to point, further you describe vehicle hire through a ride sharing service, a digital application network or platform as authorized by the city. So PTP vehicle is very understandable, is the ride-sharing service when a certain person is sharing his ride with somebody else. So I believe the definition comes in the category of this one. But I could not understand how a person can share his ride for multiple grounds on multiple trips.
Okay,
when it's not and I believe it's violating vehicle for hire definition.
Well, we'll get you those answers. I hope I'm going to ask Kathy McFarland to speak to that. I know that our bylaw was written in conjunction with Bill 30 to meet those standards. So, Ms. McFarland?
I understand your concern. We also had a concern early on in developing the bylaw because we did have existing shuttles in the city that were doing, as you said, multiple. I'll use the example of somebody gets picked up to go to Walmart, and on the way there, somebody additionally gets picked up to be dropped off at Sobeys. Because the bill seemed to be a little bit confusing on its definition, we actually contacted the provincial government directly and got a written opinion from them. And I think you're aware of that because you mentioned that in your comments, that the provincial government has told us that if the passenger can either control the route or can control their destination, the traditional shuttles where you're having multiple passengers dropped off at multiple places is acceptable under the new Local Vehicle for Hire Act from the province. And I think I also mentioned to you that if you're still not in agreement with that, that you should actually contact the province because we are taking the province's direction on that.
So I want to reply about this question because I already talked to the intake officer in Ombudsman, and the intake officer clearly mentioned this is very clear and there is no doubt. A vehicle can be used only for a single trip, so in real sense they cannot share the ride for the multiple pickups. So share ride means when person is sharing his own vehicle as a personal transportation provider with someone else, because the city does not have any law yet, any regulation for the personal transportation provider for the digital platform. We already built the digital platform and we are going to operate on 15th of April in Winnipeg. So the other thing, if personal transportation, because the intake officer mentioned, if the city makes the law, then you can, because at that point they cannot review your law because it's not the law yet. But in the certain points they can review the law in the future. But in my understanding, this is very clear. This is no confusion because in section 4, I can say is the confusion for the consideration of the municipality. But in section 2, there is no confusion for the vehicle for hire definition. So if you want to make the law, so probably I must have to file for the review of the definition for the guidelines of the passengers. So after that, I have some other question. One other question: what the city is making? What facilities they are giving to the people who want to run their service on the digital platform, right, like the rideshare system? Because in Winnipeg, it's very clear, because you mentioned class 4 is required for the taxi, limousine, shuttle, or PTP point-to-point. Because here I am clearly understandable, the point-to-point is for the digital platform. And we already built, because I already worked on the over 1,000 hours to build this application. So we already built the application, and we want to provide this service in Portage la Prairie. But I'm really confused because there is no guidelines for the PTP drivers. Because in Winnipeg, it's clearly mentioned, any person who holds the class 5, they can run their vehicle as a personal transportation provider. And the other side, I have a little confusing because when a PTP company registered with your city, so the thing, nobody, no PTP company, like the point-to-point company or the digital platform company, they are not going to putting their own vehicles. The people are putting their vehicles with us. Like anybody can drive with us. So what fees they have to pay, because it's...
excuse me for just, do you have that question written out?
No.
You don't?
No.
Okay. Because if you, are you able to answer the first part of that question, Ms. McFarland?
I've written down 2 things that I think you had questions on.
Okay, you go ahead, please.
I think you asked me about past 5 licenses, whether that was necessary or not. When the new local vehicle for hire bill came out, or act, we were given clear direction from the province that municipalities had the authority to come up with their own bylaws. And so in some areas, we have asked for different guidelines than maybe another city has in the province. But we're well within our purview to do that. So the fact that you asked about Class 5 versus Class 4 licenses, what we have in the bylaws, what we in the city of Portage la Prairie intend to follow. And your second comment you made was about ride sharing, about whether there was actually guidelines in the bylaw. So we wrote the bylaw to actually cover all types of taxis, shuttles, P2P. There's so many different terms out there, ride sharing. So we do believe that it applies to a ride-sharing service. What I would suggest to you is if you, and I think I am aware that you have developed an app to actually potentially have a ride-sharing service in Portage, and that's great. But if you have confusion on what's actually required, please come in and see us, and we can clarify that further.
Okay. So my last...
I'm going to ask you to take a break. I know there's other people that want to ask questions, and you can get up again. We usually try to give everybody a chance to ask questions.
Thank you.
I know, Mr. Knott, you had a question for us?
Yeah, I have one of 7. My first question now has changed. Would you kindly define to me or give me an indication of the difference between question period and a delegation where argument and discussion is allowed?
Well, this, well, we didn't see it as that. I didn't see it as that. It's the chair of this. This was a person seeking information about something that was on the agenda this evening, so his question seemed very appropriate. Yeah. What's your next question, Mr. Knott?
I'm not questioning your judgment or your chairmanship or the questioner. I'm just asking for clarity as to what you expect for questions.
I expect questions to be respectful, to be information-seeking, and to be as brief as realistically possible.
Thank you. Here's a brief question. The financial plan is being presented on April the 23rd. It is already online. Can we ask questions about it now, or do we have to wait till April 23rd?
Mr. Buds?
Preference be to April 23rd, when anyone else that could possibly build off a question that's presented have that opportunity to do so. So preference would be till next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
So I have other questions because regarding the Section 4 of Bill 30, like in Section 4, it is mentioned in regulating vehicle for hire industry, a municipality must regard for the desire to create and maintain a sustainable industry and meet the needs of traveling public within the municipality, as well as those who work in the industry. So here the Praveen's mentioned, like whenever municipality desire to make an bylaw, so they must need to meet of the traveling public, so as well as those who work in the industry. So, so I understand, like the municipality is meeting the desire of the public, but to have a strict competition, not to limitizing the cab companies, like I saw the Winkler law, Selkirk law, and the City of Brandon law. So there is certain limits. Like in Winkler, it's mentioned one taxi in 4,000 people. So
excuse me, sir. Have you got the question? Could you? I guess we got two choices. Could you get to the point of the question, or you could take Ms. McFarland up on her offer of coming in for.
I clearly mentioned, like because after affecting this bylaw, because the rates are too high, $1,000 for 5 vehicles. So so at that point, I believe like it should be very tough for the people who are already running.
Sorry, is that a question or?
Yeah, that's the question.
What is the question exactly?
So when you guys have $1,000 fees for the 5 vehicles, how I believe it's very hard for the existing shuttle companies to pay $1,000 fee at that point. So I believe due to this issue, like the industries are not going to be sustainable. So some of the small industries going to be.
Okay, so your question is, will we maintain the fees that we've set? I think that's okay. Ms. McFarland?
There is quite a difference between fees and penalties or fines. So the fees will remain the same for the law-abiding public who is running a taxi, shuttle, or P2P type business. If you choose as your business to actually not follow the rules and run an unlicensed service or have a driver that's unlicensed, then I would agree the fines are quite high. But that wouldn't be the normal course of business to have fines. In fact, we would sincerely hope not. If you are following the rules, you won't have to pay any fines, actually.
Okay. Were there other questions from people in the gallery? I'm going to ask you to take another break, and you can come back. There's going to be another member of the public ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The financial plan. There is an item under legislative which deals with or proposes for conventions, $85,500. Last year there was $62,000 budgeted and $62,000 spent. Could the finance person tell us what you are spending on $85,500 for a convention or conventions?
Sure. Mr. Pato?
Through your worship to the presenter, in the financial plan, which the outline is provided by the province, there says $85,000 for conventions. Conventions, unfortunately, is a term that provides reference to all training that the city pursues.
I'm sorry, I'm hard of hearing. I can't hear
That's
you.
okay, I'll try. That's better here. So the document provides conventions. It's a template from the province in the financial plan. Conventions are an all-purpose term provided by the province for all training pursued by the city of Portage. So you did provide that question in email. I have got a breakdown for that, and I'll provide that to you shortly on what is included in that category. But it comes from all training pursued by the city of Portage staff, and council actually is included under conventions. Not necessarily the most appropriate term for it. I understand that can cause confusion.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer.
Further questions?
So this is my last question, and in this question I want to ask, are you still providing some consideration for the digital platform for the app business, to promote the app business? If you guys reduce the fees for the certain P2P vehicle providers, like every person who want to register with us, he personally pay the fees, not the company is going to pay. Like in the city of Winkler, it's mentioned like we can register for free, but the person who is providing the service, who is registering, he has to go to the city and register and mention he's registered with the app and he's paying $200 for each registration of the vehicle. If you provide this kind of the amendment in bylaw, so it should be very helpful to run the PTP service in this town.
So your question would be, is there an amendment planned regarding those fees?
Yeah, fee in the PTP, especially digital platform.
When this was developed, I am certain that we didn't have the information from the City of Winkler. However, we did have the information from a number of different cities within Canada who were comparable in size, and that is why we chose $1,000. That's not per, that's $1,000 for 5 vehicles. Initially, we will be carrying on with that fee. Certainly, we may look at that in future. It is a new path for us to go down with the ride-sharing service, and if we find that our administration and the RCMP's administration of this is actually considerably lower, then we might consider that in future. But initially, we are certainly actually piggybacking on cities that are in Canada that have had ride-sharing services for some time.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions from the gallery?
So my name is Ranjot Singh, and just a quick question.
Sorry, can you just say the name again, please?
Ranjot, R-A-N-J-O-D-H. So just a quick question.
And sorry, the last name?
Singh, S-I-N-G-H.
Go ahead.
So as you said, for 5 vehicles, it's going to be $1,000, right? So that means for 6 vehicles, it's going to be $2,000?
That's what it says right now, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Knott?
In the financial plan, last year you had just under projected $1.3 million for water grants, spent about $922,000. This year you anticipate $31 million. That's 30 times the amount you had last year. Is that an accurate figure or a misprint?
I think Kathy McFarland will answer the question, but Your Worship, did I not mention that we'd be fielding financial plan questions at our next meeting?
Okay. One thing I've learned since coming to the city is we have very interesting ways that the province does show its financials. That one isn't, once I explained to you that a good portion of that is the $28 million for the Phase 1 upgrade for the wastewater plant, which is fully funded by the province primarily and the federal government program as well. And it has to show on that line.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from the gallery?
Yeah, the peanut gallery has lots of questions. Under legislative expenses, again, under your budget item is for $142,500 for grants under legislature, and also under recreation and cultural services, $1,422,500 for grants, totaling $1.5 million.
Would this question be related to the financial plan?
Yes, sir.
We're going to defer this until the meeting. We'd asked Councillor Budds for his opinion, and we're going to defer it until the meeting when we have the financial plan. And a lot of these questions are going to be asked by a lot of people. So,
my last question then would be, if I publish some of these questions in a form of a letter, would that be answered before April 23rd?
Councillor Budds?
If you could summarize your questions via an email to City Administration, you will definitely get an answer prior to April 23rd.
Go ahead, Mr. Knott.
Thank you. Would I be appropriate for me then to publicize those answers?
I think that's entirely up to you.
I'm sorry?
That would be entirely up to you. Be your choice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Budds.
Any further questions from the gallery?
I'm on your computer.
And committee is adjourned at 6:49 p.m. Thank you, everybody.